With the British surrounded at Boulogne and Calais, Commander-in-Chief Field Marshal von Rundstedt orders his panzers to a halt because of the loss of too many tanks in the advance. After 2 weeks of hard battle, German soldiers take advantage of the time off to tend to personal luxuries and some frivolity. But it all ends too soon. As the countryside becomes a battleground, civilians continue their flight. With the Germans closing in from both east and west, and with the ocean behind them, the British consider a last resort, a full evacuation from Dunkirk.
Some individuals cut off from their units came back and were helped out by French civilians. Many made their way to Dunkirk if they had been cut off during the retreat in disguise. By and large, the British Expeditionary Force fell back towards Dunkirk in good order.
When the Germans learn of the evacuation plan, von Rundstedt orders his panzers back into battle and launches the biggest attack of the campaign. But the respite has allowed the Allies the opportunity to mount a ring of artillery around the besieged army. The Germans can no longer break through easily. With all the British troops moving towards Dunkirk, the question remains, how will 340,000 of them be evacuated? May 27th, 1940. With the Germans closing in from both sides, the bulk of the British force and part of the French First Army escapes through the middle of the enemy divisions into the area around Dunkirk.
Fortunately for the British, the terrain around Dunkirk is very good for defense. There are canals which they could set up defensive positions behind and prove formidable obstacles to German tanks.
The only weapons the British have at Dunkirk are small arms and World War I vintage machine guns. There's a noticeable shortage of any heavy artillery.
One of the great losses were once they got to Dunkirk, all the vehicles, artillery pieces had to be destroyed. Many of the trucks were driven into the English Channel, using to build up makeshift docks to bring boats alongside when the evacuation started.
While a delaying action is waged in the south at the port of Calais to prevent the Germans from driving up the coast, the battle to hold Dunkirk rages furiously. The fight moves from street to street and house to house. The battle for Dunkirk has been reduced to the bare minimum. There are no large armies facing each other, just small groups of desperate trapped men. May 28th, with German tanks within sight of Dunkirk, von Rundstedt orders his panzers out for good and heads them south to Paris.
The German commanders were flabbergasted. They couldn't believe that they had been told to halt. They felt that they could have wiped out the British Army right there. We now know that Hitler probably didn't want to destroy the British Army at that point because he still in 1940 had visions of a German-English alliance against Russia.
But there are still nearly 350,000 men at Dunkirk to be evacuated. The rescue plan, called Operation Dynamo, has many obstacles. English ships must face minefields, German U-boats, and Luftwaffe fighters as they cross the channel. If they make it through, there are still the enemy guns at Calais. Once within reach of Dunkirk, the big ships discover they are too big for the port's shallow waters. They can't get in close enough to evacuate the men. Only 7,000 make it out the first day in rescue boats, just 2%. On the 29th, the ships use a new coastal approach to Dunkirk. They escape the Calais shelling, but instead they're bombed and strafed by the Luftwaffe.